Welcome back to another episode of Earth is Our Home with Dr. Thomas Blaine. Today, Dr. Thomas Blaine is going to be talking about the continual record high global temperature rates and what that means to us. So stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of Earth is Our Home with Dr. Thomas Blaine. Dr. Thomas Blaine is an associate professor with the Ohio State University Extension Program. Today, Dr. Blaine is going to be talking about the global climate change and the record heats that we have been seeing in the last few months. Tom, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Great to be sharing, this task of Earth is Our Home with you. You're a great partner, and I think together we have we've provided a lot of great educational material to the public.
As you know, I'm always a skeptic, and I always question things. And when I do question those things, you provide the necessary information that makes sense. So I really appreciate the thoroughness that you have in putting on these programs.
So today we are having a look at the end of March, early April 2024. Record high global temperatures are continuing. And if you've been following with us on Earth is Our Home, it's our fourth season now. During the first 2 to 3 seasons, we had global temperatures that were below the trend. They were above average, but they were below the trend. Now they're not only above average and above the trend, but they are records. Definitely records for the satellite era, and also probably the warmest temperatures since the previous interglacial called the Eemian about 115,000 years ago, before the most recent ice age began and cooled everything down. Here's one of my favorite pictures of the ocean. I love this picture because we talk on here a lot about the oceans. The majority of Earth is covered by ocean. Not only that, it's the ocean temperatures and currents which influence global temperatures. And right now, in the short run, what has been causing temperatures to go above trend and below trend specifically is the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO. If you recall, with the La Nina, when we came on here in 2021, we were already 2 years into the La Nina, and Earth's temperature was below trend. Because La Nina cools the Earth, El Nino warms the Earth. But we hadn't seen an El Nino in quite a long time. And go to the Earth is Our Home main page, and go back and look at all the stuff we've done on El Nino and La Nina and how they influence the short run temperatures. When people say, well, a large part of global warming or global cooling is natural, it's not caused by humans. That's true. A lot of it is. There's a natural component, but there's a human component as well. And what I want to do is make sure you understand the distinction between the two, and not just throw up your hands and say, oh, well, some of it's natural. We can tell how much is natural and how much is being caused by humans. So in early 2023, the La Nina weakened and was replaced by El Nino as the year went on. And sure enough, when I saw this happening, I predicted that Earth's temperature was going to rise way above the trend. And so we followed it carefully and noted that the return of El Nino brought Earth's temperature to a record high by about September, October, November. And we noted that oceanographers and climatologists were predicting as recently as January of this year, just a couple of months ago, that El Nino was still strengthening, which meant our temperatures were going to continue to go higher and higher in record territory. And here you see what I'm talking about. This is satellite temperature measurements of the lower troposphere. That's from sea level up to about 30,000 feet. And look out at the right. In early 2023, we were actually below the baseline. A lot of people were saying, well, global warming's not really happening. We're below the baseline. But as I was pointing out, that was an artifact of La Nina. And I warned that when El Nino came back, as we knew it eventually would, look out. We're not going to just resume a trend. We're going to skyrocket. And we did. You look, the proof is in the pudding. And you could see all those numbers up around 0.9 degrees above the baseline. That's 0.9 degrees Celsius, 1.6 to 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit above the baseline. And the baseline in this is the temperature average between 1979 and the present. So you look at all the ups and downs, those are El Ninos and La Ninas, but the upward trend overall through the data is human induced. Now, here's the thing about it. We're trying to figure out now, what is El Nino going to do? Because some oceanographers are calling for a super El Nino. And if that happens, the records are going to keep falling. And we're going to go up to something along the line of 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius above this baseline. But there have been patterns of quick turnarounds for El Nino and La Nina. The period 2002 to 06 was like that. If you look around 2002, we started out looking like we were coming into a strong El Nino there in 02, but it fizzled. It stayed El Nino majority, El Nino, for the next 4 years, but it wasn't a super El Nino. We did finally get a super one in 2015 to 2016 that led to the record high temperature we had then. So now we were looking at this one, trying to figure out, wow, is this new one going to be a super El Nino? It's very difficult to predict El Nino. What's not difficult to predict is when El Nino comes, global temperatures are going to go up above trend. When La Nina comes, global temperatures are going to go down below trend. That's not difficult. That's easy to predict. But sitting here now in March and April of 2024, trying to predict where this is going to be, this graph, in the next few months is very difficult.
You know, Tom, it's interesting. Since 1997 up until the present, it looks like 2/3 of the years was in blue, was below
Yes.
average. And that El Nino doesn't occur as much. Any thoughts on that?
There are a lot of thoughts on that. That's what was keeping global temperature down below the trend and making skeptics say, hey, global warming's not really happening like they predicted. You know, it gave skeptics or contrarians or cynics an opportunity to deny global warming. But I kept saying and repeating, look, the temperatures aren't going up real high because we're in this deep La Nina. All that blue, that's the reason. And as soon as that changes, look out. We're going to make up that lost ground and then some. There's an enormous amount of heat underneath the surface of the equatorial Pacific. And as soon as it gets exposed to the surface and the atmosphere, it's going to warm the planet quite a bit. And that's what's happened.
It seems to me that sometimes nature has its way of counteracting problems. And I'm just wondering if nature is helping us by keeping it cool.
I don't think so. I don't think that was any relationship like that. I think it was just the La Nina cycle became strong. You know, it's happened before. We've had strong El Ninos. The El Nino and La Nina, you know, they're really based on what's called the Walker circulation and, you know, where the high pressure sets up in the equatorial Pacific. And no, I don't think it's related. I don't think it's determined, let me put it that way, to offset global warming or anything like that. I think it's just something that changes for other reasons that are probably very complicated. That's why I said it's very difficult to predict. But here's the thing. A lot of the oceanographers now are saying that this super El Nino they were predicting a few months ago may not continue. That, you know, the heat records then would not continue if we slide back into La Nina. And this is totally different than what we were expecting in January and February, where it looked like a super El Nino was coming. If we back off on that, we will see global temperatures back off down to trend. And so, you know, these natural drivers, again, very difficult to predict. So we're talking about natural drivers of global temperature and human drivers. Well, there's the human driver. And you can see that one's just a steady increase. Carbon dioxide concentrations, parts per million. This data set, we started getting good global data on CO2 in 1957. It's about 315 parts per million CO2. It's now about 420. And it's been very steady. I don't see any change in the trend. And that's why I'm confident in saying that despite the ups and downs caused by El Nino and La Nina, the human factor is leading to warming.
Tom, in looking at this chart, I agree with you that there's CO2 increasing in the atmosphere. When does it become lethal?
The carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere is not lethal. In other words, we could very well go up all the way to 560. That would be double the pre-industrial level. The carbon dioxide at that level, 560 parts per million, even if it went to 1,000 parts per million, it's not lethal. I mean, you'd still be okay as far as breathing the air and so forth. What it does, though, the higher the concentration, the more heat it traps. So it contributes to the warming of the planet. Now, if you say, well, how much? That's called carbon sensitivity. Sensitivity specifically refers to if you double the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, how much does temperature change? That's the big question. And that's called sensitivity. Sensitivity of the atmosphere to carbon dioxide. But again, the gas is not lethal. I mean, it's plant food. Plants take in CO2 and they put out oxygen. Animals, we take in oxygen and put out CO2. It's a cycle. It's a cycle. And you can have more, you can have less. That in and of itself is not going to hurt anybody. But as the concentration goes up, we know that CO2 traps heat in the atmosphere. That's called the greenhouse effect. And we've known about that since the middle of the 1800s. Scientists figured that out back in the 1800s. And so, you know, that's what we need to remember, the impact of carbon dioxide on global temperature. So right now, climatologists and oceanographers are in a quandary as to whether we're going to be experiencing a super El Nino like they really were pretty sure was going to happen back in December and January, or whether or not the El Nino is going to back off and bring in minor La Nina again. We may be in that kind of pattern we were between 2002 and 2006, where it was an El Nino, but it was weak. All right. And even as weak as this one's been so far, it's raised global temperatures. So I'm looking for global temperatures to continue to rise. Remember, 2023 was the warmest year on record in the modern era. Warmest year on record, 2023, as measured by satellites. And there's a good chance that 2024 will break that record. I'm pretty sure it will, even if the El Nino backs off. We've already got so much heat that's escaped into the atmosphere from the equatorial Pacific that's going to circulate around the globe, and there's not much there to cool it down. So I believe we will have a warmer year than 2023 here in 2024. Another thing that's for sure too is larger and larger percentages of the American public are accepting the fact that humans are causing Earth's atmosphere to heat up. We're seeing fewer and fewer contrarians or skeptics. Public opinion is changing on this. And it's not so much, Patrick, that people have changed their minds. It's that the people that are Americans now in 2024 and the people who were Americans 24 years ago, let's say in 2000, I should say, they're not the same people. They're just not the same people. Many of the people that were around in the year 2000 have gone on into eternity. My parents, World War II generation, perished around 2005 to 07. They've been replaced by my children. My children were little young ones at that time. Now they're highly educated, approaching middle age. Their attitude toward global warming is completely different. So the new younger generations of America are replacing the older ones. Now the swing era folks are the on the older edge. Swing era meaning the 1930s and early to mid 40s. And they're in their 80s now, or close to it, or pretty much in their 80s or 90s. The baby boomers are mainly in their 60s and 70s. The younger cohorts have heard about climate change and CO2 their whole life. So as a group, they have less doubt about it than the others do, and that they have less doubt about global warming than, say, about gravity or how hurricanes form. It's just part of what they learn in science. Gravity works this way. Hurricanes form this way. Global warming is occurring because of CO2 that humans are increasing by burning fossil fuels. And so that's changing a lot and may cause more of the inaction to be replaced by action in coming decades. But I got some bad news for us, Patrick. You know, we love to show, because it helps us reconcile the short-term changes with the long-term trends and the natural changes with the human changes. This is the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index. It's been discontinued. So we're not going to have this tool. The last month on there was January. And we're not going to be able to use this to see if we get the super El Nino or not. I was always getting that from NOAA. They publish it. But the data source itself was the Japanese. The Japanese were running the buoys and everything out there measuring the ocean temperatures and giving us the statistics on El Nino and La Nina that were in that data set. Japan has terminated this. I will be searching for alternative sources, but at least we had that long enough that you should know, even 10 years from now, if you haven't seen any El Nino data and you look at the global temperature data 10 years from now, you should be able to figure out when the El Ninos were and when the La Ninas were, because the principle, it hasn't changed. The principle is the same. La Nina tends to cool global temperature. El Nino tends to warm temperature. And, thank goodness we had that data set long enough to learn that and to make that point. There it is again. But we can say goodbye to that as far as the future.
Tom, that's really good information that you have. I know that you will find resources available to keep all of us informed. Do you mind people calling you or emailing you?
No, I don't mind. That's why I put this information up here. That's me. You can email me. You can call my cell. If you would like me to come and give a presentation, I can do it by Zoom. I can do it in person with your group, educational group, environmental group, political group, whatever your group is. I would really be happy to talk about any aspect of climate change. What's the impact that we expect for Ohio in the next 20 years, the next 50, the next 100, years? How does the greenhouse effect really work? All those things like that come to your mind. What are the challenges for agriculture? What could agricultural producers be doing to prepare? I've taught on all those aspects of this topic. And yes, I would love to interact more with the public on this.
We're talking with Dr. Thomas Blaine. He's an associate professor with the Ohio State University, the Extension program. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. It's always a pleasure.